When the old political structure of Eastern Europe fell apart in 1918, Lithuania once again declared its independence. Throughout this time, the Hill of Crosses was used as a place for Lithuanians to pray for peace, for their country, and for the loved ones they had lost during the wars of independence. The site took on a special significance during the years 1944–1990, when Lithuania was occupied by the Soviet Union. Continuing to travel to the hill and leave their tributes, Lithuanians used it to demonstrate their allegiance to their original identity, religion and heritage. It was a venue of peaceful resistance, although the Soviets worked hard to remove new crosses, and bulldozed the site at least 3 times, including attempts in 1963 and 1973. There were even rumors that the authorities planned to build a dam on the nearby Kulv River, a tributary too, so that the hill would end up underwater. Number 7. Abandoned doll factory. This doll factory in Spain has an uncomfortable way of getting under your skin. It was abandoned sometime in the 80s. However, everything was left. You can find there all sorts of creepy stuff, from boxes of doll parts, machinery to half-finished dolls still lying on the assembly line. It gives you the idea that everything still works normally and there's been no abandonment whatsoever. At the time when the factory was in operation, porcelain dolls were commonly made with human hair. This makes things even creepier. The 3-story building hasn't really changed over the years, except for the floor in one wing. That one collapsed a few years ago. Besides that, everything else remains the same. There's not even much graffiti to show that other people have explored it. So, it's mostly left untouched and unexplored. However, there are some photographers and explorers who have visited the building out of curiosity. They have noticed that a mountain of ceramic arms and legs covered the entire 3rd floor. This was followed by the unintentionally creepy, the heads and bodies were much rarer. Number 6. Chernobyl Theme Park. The Pripyat Amusement Park is an abandoned amusement park located in Pripyat, Ukraine. It was to have its grand opening on 1 May 1986, in time for the May Day celebrations, but these plans were cancelled on 26 April, when the Chernobyl disaster occurred a few kilometers away. Several sources report that the park was opened for a short time on 27 April before the announcement to evacuate the city was made, and one site shows photos of the amusement park in operation. Theories that the park was hurriedly opened in the aftermath of the accident to distract Pripyat residents from the unfolding disaster nearby seem to be substantiated by the fact that some of the rides were never fully completed, the paratrooper was not fitted with canopies and the Ferris wheel's cladding was incomplete. It is more likely and generally held this video is from the winter, due to clothing worn, and it was a test. Considering the lack of panic at the time of evacuation, there was no need to distract people in any case. The park, and its Ferris wheel in particular, have become a symbol of the Chernobyl disaster. Park was only open one day, April 27, 1986, as entertainment for those preparing to evacuate the Ukrainian city following the April 26 Chernobyl disaster. Festive decorations still linger near the haunting rides for the planned May 1, 1986 opening that never came. Its looming Ferris wheel has become an unsettling icon of the nuclear disaster, and visitors sometimes leave stuffed animals in its cars as a memorial. The park still contains varying levels of radiation, although the concrete areas are mostly safe. The area under the Ferris wheel has some of the highest levels of radiation in the amusement park. There is also an abandoned bumper car ride, with most rides still fully intact. Number 5. The Fire Mummies. Kabayan Mummies. The fire mummies of the Philippines, also known as the Kabayan mummies, Benguet mummies, or Ibaloy mummies, are a group of mummies found along the mountain slopes of Kabayan, a town in the northern part of the Philippines. They were made from as early as 2000 BC until the 16th century, when Spain colonized the Philippines. Today, they remain in natural caves in a museum in Kabayan. Scientists believe that the fire mummies were created by the Ibaloy between 1200 and 1500 AD in 5 towns in Benguet and buried in caves. Others believe that the process of mummification began at makes the fire 2000 BC. What mummies unique is their process of mummification? That mummification began shortly before a person died, where he would digest a very salty drink. After his death, his corpse was washed and set over a fire in a seated position, thus drying the fluids. Smoke from tobacco was blown into the mouth to dry the body's inside and internal organs. Eventually, herbs were rubbed into the body. Mummified bodies are then placed in a coffin made of pine wood and laid to rest in rock shelters. Natural caves are man-made burial niches. The practice of that mummification ended, since Spaniards colonized the Philippines in the 16th century. When the fire mummies were discovered, in the early 20th century by Westerners, the mummies have been known to local communities for hundreds of years. Many of them were stolen, because the caves were mostly unprotected. Because of this, Monument Watch, a non-profit organization, declared the site as one of the 100 most endangered sites in the world. After logging operations intensified in the area, the location of many caves became known. Unfortunately, this has led to looting, as unconscientious visitors have been eager to leave their mark, including graffiti, on the Kabayan mummies. The Kabayan mummies were listed in the 1998 World Monuments Watch by the World Monuments Fund. Funding through American Express was used for emergency conservation and the creation of a comprehensive management plan. Additionally, local authorities from surrounding municipalities collaborated in cultural awareness campaign to introduce the mummies to Filipinos. Tourist facilities were also constructed in order to control visitation and prevent harmful intrusions. The fire mummies remain in natural caves with relatively small security and have been designated as one of the 100 world's most endangered heritage sites. Officials know 50-80 other mummies, but they will not give their locations because of their fear of vandalism. A small museum in Kabayan, Benguet also displays a few mummies. Number 4. Aokigahara Suicide Forest. Aokigahara is a forest at the northwest base of Mount Fuji in Japan. The forest is known to be quiet because of the absence of wildlife and the wind-blocking density of the trees that are in it. A number of rocky, icy caverns are in the forest and some of them are popular tourist destinations. Demons in Japanese mythology are associated with the forest. It is known as a popular suicide spot and is reportedly the most popular in Japan. It also ranks as the second in the world after San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. There are signs in the forest in both Japanese and English that try to persuade people not to commit suicide. The forest is said to be haunted by the yurei, angry spirits that were left to die. Number 3. The Sedlec ossuary. The ossuary is estimated to contain the skeletons of between 40,000 and 70,000 people, whose bones have, in many cases, been artistically arranged to form decorations and furnishings for the chapel. The ossuary is among the most visited tourist attractions of the Czech Republic, attracting over 200,000 visitors annually. 4 enormous bell-shaped mounds occupy the corners of the chapel. An enormous chandelier of bones, which contains at least one of every bone in the human body, hangs from the center of the nave with garlands of skulls draping the vault. Other works include piers and monstrances flanking the altar, a coat of arms of the House of Schwarzenberg, and the signature of František Rint, also executed in bone, on the wall near the entrance. In 1278, Henry, the abbot of the Cistercian monastery in Sedlec, was sent to the Holy Land by King Ottokar II of Bohemia. He returned with a small amount of earth he had removed from Golgotha and sprinkled it over the abbey cemetery. The word of this pious act soon spread and the cemetery in Sedlec became a desirable burial site throughout Central Europe. In the mid-14th century, during the Black Death, and after the Hussite Wars in the early 15th century, many thousands were buried in the abbey cemetery, so it had to be greatly enlarged. Around 1400, a Gothic church was built in the center of the cemetery with a vaulted upper level and a lower chapel to be used as an ossuary for the mass graves unearthed during construction, or simply slated for demolition to make room for new burials. After 1511, the task of exhuming skeletons and stacking their bones in the chapel was given to a half-blind monk of the order. Between 703 and 1710 a new entrance was constructed to support the front wall, which was leaning outward, and the upper chapel was rebuilt. This work, in the Czech Baroque style, was designed by Jan Santini Eichel. In 1800, František Rint, a woodcarver, was employed by the Schwarzenberg family to put the bone heaps into order, yielding a macabre result. The signature of Rint, also executed in bone, appears on the wall near the entrance to the chapel. Number 2. The Island of the Doll. The Island of the Dolls, originally owned by Don Julian Santana, is full of dolls hanging from trees and buildings covered with cobwebs and insects. The place was named during the 1950s, when the owner began to hang them as protection against evil spirits. Santana was a neighbor of the Barrio de la Asunción, where he used to go to drink pulque after having sold his vegetables, until, due to superstitions, he began to preach the Bible, being expelled from the sector. According to legend, a young woman drowned entangled among the lilies of the canal and her body was found on the banks of the Santampa Chinampas. Don Julian began to experience inexplicable situations, so, terrified, he placed dolls that he found in the garbage or in the canals of Cumanco with the idea that they would scare the soul of the young woman who would cry out, "I want my doll." He also found a doll floating nearby and, assuming it belonged to the deceased girl, hung it from a tree as a sign of respect. After this, he began to hear whispers, footsteps, and anguished wails in the darkness even though his hut, hidden deep inside the woods of Xochimilco, was miles away from civilization. Driven by fear, he spent the next 50 years hanging more and more dolls, some missing body parts, all over the island in an attempt to appease what he believed to be the drowned girl's spirit. In 1987, an eco-tourist rescue was made and the island was found covered with water lily. Since then and after the death of Don Julian, the Chinampa became a place of great tourist affluence. The place gained fame after 1943, when Mexican filmmaker Emilio Fernandez filmed Maria Candelaria. After Barrera's death in 2001, he is believed to have been viciously murdered by his dolls, his body reportedly found in the exact spot where he found the girl's body 50 years before. The area became a popular tourist attraction where visitors bring more dolls. The locals describe it as charmed, not haunted, even though travelers claim the dolls whisper to them. Number 1. The Matsuo Ghost Mine. The Hachimantai Plateau where the mine is located in O Mountains of central Honshu is a volcanic area and the presence of sulfur deposits was well known from an early age. However, due to the remoteness of the area and difficulty of transport, these deposits were not exploited. Iron pyrites were discovered by local villagers in 1882 in Matsuo village. In 1911 a Yokohama-based trading company, Matsuo, began modern mine development at an altitude of 900 meters 3,000 feet, at the base of the peak of Higashi Hachimantai. In 1934 the Japanese government railway Hanawa line was extended to near the mine, an Obuke station was established. At one point, the Matsuo mine accounted for 30% of Japan's sulfur production and 15% of its pyrite, boasting that it had the greatest production in Asia. In the late 1950s, it was the third largest mine in Japan in terms of tonnage of ore, 400,000 tons of iron ore and 200,000 tons of sulfur. However, in the 1960s, the demand for sulfur was less, and the production of low-cost sulfur as a byproduct of oil refining and the increasing availability of cheap imported iron ore caused the mine severe economic distress. In order to drastically reduce costs, the conversion to an open-pit mine was considered and rejected. In 1969 the company went bankrupt. A new company was formed to concentrate solely on pyrite extraction. However, this venture also failed by 1972 and the mine has been closed since that time.